Hello, and welcome to our discussion on performance analysis. The title of this one is How to Increase Your Win Percentage Through Performance Analysis. I'm delighted to be joined by two experts in the field. First up, we have George Murray. George is the current Head of Performance Analysis with Munster Rugby. And we also have Paul Kelleher. Paul is the under 18 Irish national team coach and also the under 14 academy coach. Lads, how are we getting on?
Very well, Niall.
All good, all good. So do you want to just give us a little bit of background really on your history in performance analysis? We'll start with you, George.
Yeah, sure, Niall. And thanks for having me on. I suppose I've been working in performance analysis for nearly 21 years now, almost since the start of the birth of it in Ireland. I started out with Munster Rugby, working in their coach development department, pretty much using 8 VHS decks and, copying from one VHS to another VHS to where I am now, nearly a 19-year career as head of performance with Munster Rugby.
Very good. And Paul, what's been your experience?
I guess Doug Leishner was the one that kind of really influenced that in terms of one day when we had no statistician or we had no video guy, and he said I'd rather do video rather than do stats because I can stat from the video, and then just got into it and made it very kind of prevalent in my coaching, and just started fiddling around, and then all of a sudden now I'm here and I do my own scouting at the Euros and do my own video, and it's I think it helps me as a coach and just as much as it helps the players.
Very good. Okay, and I guess we're going to sort of start off really by looking at how do you use video analysis now, like in your training, in your games, like what's sort of like the week-to-week use of video analysis, George?
Yeah, I think there's a myriad of stuff with which comes under the umbrella of performance analysis, whether it's statistics, whether it's video footage of training, video footage at games, live interaction with coaches. There's so much that comes under the realm of performance analysis. I suppose my role there is to have a department that ties all that together and basically produces something effective, efficient, and usable or actionable for the team. So whether it's at training using 3-4 different camera angles, a drone, getting some live footage to the coaches during training, getting some automatic feedback, whether it's in game, similarly taking in 4 different camera angles, I suppose dissecting or reading that footage and using the statistics within it to give an actual accurate feedback within the game to make change. And obviously then you've got a lot of your post and pre-game, largely around statistical work and trends on your players, trends on your performance and the upcoming opposition. So from a scouting point of view, there's the person looks after the scouting, there's a person looks after, performance statistics for an individual. So, it's wide ranging. It's I'm sure we'll talk in detail a little bit more about certain parts of it.
Yeah, like it's all, especially when you're at the professional level, like the amount that goes into performance analysis is huge. Paul, whenever you're working in a more volunteer capacity at with under 18 Irish team, what sort of level of detail do you use? How do you use performance analysis in your training and games?
I think for us, especially when we don't have the resources, say a professional organization has, for me, it's about the trends. So what trends are we showing positively and areas that we need to improve? And also from a scouting perspective, the trends that the opposition do. So if we're scouting, say, Ukraine, and their point guard is averaging 45 from the 3-point line, we're trying to show the trends of where that happens. So that's the kind of detail we're trying to go. So match the video to the trend as much as we possibly can. And then from our own perspective, we try and make sure that we do area, and we try and use the phrases. We try to avoid negative phrases like we need to do this better, and we use the phrase areas of improvement first. So we'll show where we could have done a little bit better. And then the next thing, we show the similar situations and we show the positivity of how it was done well. But I think also from terminology perspective, so, you know pretty well now that I'm big into terminology, we try and video the terminology of the action. So if we're trying to work on heels outside the lane from a defensive perspective, we will try and show everything positive about getting defenders' heels outside the lane to affect the attempt at the rim. So that's kind of where we are. So our terminology within the action to show the positivity of what we're trying to achieve.
So what are you saying there? You're saying basically, if you're seeing like heels outside the paint, so you want the players both feet outside the paint, you'll like put a clip together with various videos of players doing that, result in successful actions.
Yeah.
So it reinforces the player learning like this is why it's a good thing.
And we'll also try and, like, obviously at the next level, we'll try and find clips of NBA players, college players that do that as well. So that way then we're showing that it's not just at this level, it's important, it's the next level and the level above that also. So we're trying to show, you know, someone that has a good influence on them from their position. So it might be from a 4 or 5 position, or it might be from help from the 1s or the 2s. So we're always trying to make it relevant to the players and what we're trying to achieve, rather than just throwing out random stuff that may not be as effective.
Important point that Paul makes, you know, about habitual change. And, you know, Paul, you're approaching it from a coach's point of view and an analyst's point of view and merging the both of them. And I think that's very important, because if you want to have influence in an organization, or you want it from an analysis point of view, you have to have the you have to have the trust of the coach. Fundamentally, if you don't have the trust of the coach and what he wants to portray to the players, well, then a lot of what you do is invaluable. So, I mean, what Paul's talking about, best practice there, and you know, getting good habit change within the players is highlighting a video or an action, and making sure that action lives within the organization, and you know, it's accountable. Everyone's accountable to it. But most importantly, like Paul said there, you encourage by showing good images. You encourage by promoting the action, rather than just constantly banging at it, you know, and saying you're doing it wrong, etc. But
okay, very good. I was going to ask, just like, is that how big of a side of the game is because you talk about sort of all of the performance analysis across the squad, but how much of it is like individual player on player, where you're showing them sort of corrections or showing them, you know, sort of tips or ways they can improve? And for you, George, in the rugby side of things?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Well, it's a bit like Paul says, you've got your terminology. So within rugby as well, you've got your different styles of play. You've got your different technical and tactical elements of the game that you have to improve on. And like Paul said there, we will code every element like that, and in line with the terminology that's used. So you know, when coach, first of all, from a basic standard performance analysis point of view, the coach needs access, the player needs access to those terminology, strength and weaknesses immediately, or certainly at a touch of a button. So that's the basic part of the job, is to get all that available to the coaches and the players. Then it's about creating innovative ways of presenting that you can influence. And I think that's largely our job, is like using those statistics to visualize them in a nice, inventive way, or create a long trending story of improvement. So I think I'm tipping around the main point there is make sure that everybody has access to what's needed, and there's accuracy in how it's coded and how it's stated, and then make sure that it's visualized in the right way.
And like, just for a question for both of you, really, it's how do you disseminate that information to the players? Like, is there an app you use where sort of all the players have access, or do you just send videos out through, like, you know, just personal one-on-one videos, email, social media, whatever? Or how do you communicate that? Or do you sit down face to face and show them the iPad and say, you know, this is what you're doing wrong?
I think for us, I mean, I've obviously when you're in the voluntary situation, you got to be inventive in how you do that. So I use WhatsApp an awful lot. So, like, especially the night before of a European game, we might have our video ready. We'll send it to the players the night before. They can view it, so they can kind of, I wouldn't say have an opinion about it, but they can certainly view it and be ready for what's coming tomorrow, rather than just springing it on them at the last minute. So they'll see the areas that we've identified that we need to improve, and they'll see the areas that we're trying to attack the opposition the next day, and then we'll present it the following day. But I think the big thing is, we don't want it too long where they lose focus, and we don't want it too short where they're just flippant about it either. So I think getting that balance, and I mean, I remember my first call final or video analysis 25 minutes long, and it just became too much. And then we're now down to about a 6-minute clip the night before, and then we'll probably speed it up the following day once they're aware of it. But we'll have gone through the scope. But I think individually and collectively, I think WhatsApp is a great way, because they have it. It's like, I mean, kids are on their phone the whole time now. So why not utilize the platform that they have, that they're going to be on, and they can see it. So we'll send some individual stuff, we'll send some collective stuff, you know, and then we'll highlight it, we put a bit of writing on it so they can see the terminology, they can see exactly, so they can pause it, they can see it, they can do all that sort of stuff themselves, and they'll give feedback themselves. Yeah, I see what you're talking about here. I see the fact that I opened the gate here a little bit too early, or whatever it is, and they become very honest, I feel, when they see it. And I think that's been a huge positive element in video analysis for me, especially for the underage.
George, do you want to come on there?
Yeah, sure. I know, since that we're in the basketball arena here, I might as well talk a little bit of basketball, even though I know very little about it. But I did have the luxury of spending a week with the Golden State Warriors a couple of years ago, with a bit of CPD work. And I went to their analytics department, went to their coaching department, and tried to understand how they merged their both departments together to make something effective. And one of the things Paul's talking about there, about how to get all information down, and I've seen every bloody way of presenting video and data, and some has been amazing and some has been horrendous. And time and attention spans are the critical thing in this. And one of the things the Golden State Warriors, which I took out and took back to Munster, was obviously from a 3-point scoring point of view. They use their 3-point presentation point of view. So whether you're presenting on, you know, from our in our sport, whether you're talking about a first phase attack, for example, they will say you have 3 points and 3 ways of presenting it, and 3 minutes to present it. Okay, so everything was pitched around that 3-point presentation skill set. So whether it's whether it's a training clip, a game clip, and one statistic, that's your 3 ways of presenting it, and then you got 3 minutes to present it with 3 points.
Wow. And so can you go on that more, Charlotte? So that's sort of their philosophy across their whole training, across their whole learning side of things with the players, or
learning is the key there, because we've got 60 players, 40 odd senior players plus academy that come into our meetings. Every single one of them has a different way of learning, and you know, if it's me sitting up there in a droll kind of way of presenting, you know, I could lose 50% of that crowd after 1 minute. So I suppose their ideal and philosophy around presenting for all their coaches, and they all practiced it, was to pick their 3 points, pick their 3 ways of presenting it, make it as fun as possible and retainable as possible. And that's a skill set in its own, and it's not easy in a high pressure situation that you want to cover more. But I mean, we covered, I don't know, maybe 8 meetings this week. We went out and played last night in Glasgow, 8:15 in the evening in front of no crowd, you know, 70 miles per hour winds, 40 mils of rain over 3 hours. And, you know, what we presented on Monday was irrelevant. And that's why I suppose we pitch a lot of our stuff is that constant improvement of yourself, rather than heavily focused on just the scouting. Yes, you need to see what your enemy is going to bring, because you're foolish if you don't. But, you know, largely having that consistent improvement of your own team and that recycling of information is critical.
Yeah, very good.
I think as well, I mean, over COVID, one of the things that we've experimented with the national team on our Zoom calls is we actually gave them a game of 2 years ago's Europeans, and got them to break it down and have them present the scout and the breakdown back to us. And just like that, we gave them no barriers. They presented it whatever way they wanted. They could have used PowerPoint, video breakdown, you name it, whatever. And 4 different groups, 4 different presentations, every single one of them wonderful. So they can get quite creative, and you can learn a lot about their perfectionisms, their flaws, their ideologies of how things can work. So it's actually a great learning tool for coaches as well, to have the players present back and see what they're going to do as well. And it's, I found it fascinating. It was a great time for me to be around the players and that. And like what we are going to do next is give them another game, but they've got to analyze their position, what their position did well and what their position didn't do well. And that's the next thing. So I think us using analysis, but also the players using analysis and learning how to do that, I think helps them learn to see the game a little bit better too, I think.
Yeah, I think George made the great point. Humans all learn in different ways, so there's no one size fits all way for the educated players. So if someone learn more by doing and going out and making their own presentations, that could be a really useful way versus just watching something. But because if you've got a squad at any level where you're, underage, club level, or if you're at elite level, there's going to be different players in that group who learn in different ways. So, like, how important do you have to find some kind of like video analysis or performance analysis, even down to the lower ends of the sport? So, I know George Mosher works with a higher age. Paul, you work with under 14 academy. So, like at the under 14 level, is there much video analysis there?
I mean, I'd probably record the practice sessions just for my own perspective to see what we can do better and stuff like that. I mean, sometimes I know with Neptune, we've shown some stuff, or we've brought them into a room. So rather than send them stuff, because we can't obviously contact the kids that age or whatever, and it's pointless sending it to the parents. So we'll have our own projector and we show them that, and they find it quite fascinating that they get to see themselves that they traditionally wouldn't be able to do. So we started that culture a little bit earlier than what we traditionally would be. But I think I think video is huge, and I think one of the ways around especially for coaches, it's a coaching tool, and within the parameters, as long as it's not on any singular individual, to me, I think it's fine. But it's a coaching tool just as much as a player development tool as well. So I think that's what we kind of need to emphasize in that too.
And George, what level would you go down to? I know you're involved with elite level, but would you be involved in underage structures at all?
Not directly myself, but we have people within the department, and obviously the organisation is very empowered by performance analysis. So we there's different elements. You've got coach development, so we're using Huddle software, and we're using Huddle, the app on the phones. We're using Huddle for their web browsers. So pretty much every department and organisation, whether it's schools, whether it's club level, whether it's coach development or player development in the academies, etc., all have access to Huddle. And they're all pitched into their little groups. So a lot of our best practice skills will be sent out there. A lot of our terminology learnings will be sent out to every player, and particularly the coaches that are coaching those players at underage. So it's quite active. But again, going back to everything, if it doesn't start at the top and have a correct positioning in the organization and a valued positioning in the organization, it won't flow to the bottom as effectively as it should do. And I think a lot of what we try to do is bring those coaches in, or bring those educators in to see how we use it, and how they could use it. Yes, they don't have access to every bit of software that we have or hardware from a recording point of view, but they can certainly use those innovative ways, which like Paul mentioned earlier on, whether it's using your phone recording and posting through WhatsApp, or whether it's golfers are probably the best examples of internal performance analysts. They're obsessed with using free swing app analysis, and some spend hours out their back gardens hacking the garden, but they're effectively trying to performance analyze. And I think a lot of it gets misjudged, where they pigeonhole, or people will pigeonhole performance analysis as a statistical department or a front office or part of the organization. But once you start realizing it's far more reaching than that, I think you've got engagement.
Yeah, and a good example actually to come across there, George, was Paul. Paul would come to the national camp, the Bassbarrow national camp in Gormastown, and a part of his role there was breaking down players' shots and individually. But now any player with access to a camera phone, you can record yourself, Paul, and there's apps out there you can help you adjust your shooting form.
Yeah, I mean, Coach's Eye, I think it's cheap enough is a pretty good one, and it kind of captures the movement, and you can draw on it, you can get the angles on it, and it's pretty good. But even just a regular camera on your phone at this stage, I mean, you can draw the lines from the edit version on any smartphone, iPhone, Android at this point. So I mean, I think all phones are pretty well equipped at this point to handle any sort of technical improvement that a player wants to make. As we said earlier, I mean, we're a voluntary organization. I mean, I purchased Final Cut Pro 8-9 years ago. I've been through 3 devices so far, and the same licenses worked every single time. And recently I'm using KindMaster, which allows you to draw and put more verbiage on it, and allows you to freeze the frame so you can actually do that sort of thing and be more deliberate in what you're looking for, and the flickers, and you can put highlights in it. And I think for that perspective, I think the kids and the young players love that stuff because they get to see the colorful actions, they get to see the options, It's a great way of teaching decision making too, I think. I mean, I love the fact that the players understand the choice they're made. And we go back to trends that we mentioned earlier on. We might show the same action 4, 5, 6 times, but the different options off of the same action. And now all of a sudden they're seeing the value of that. And obviously if it's important to us and we're constantly preaching it, it'll become important to the players in terms of terminology and the execution of it.
Yeah, and you said, as you mentioned, a few apps there. When Huddle mentioned, the technology in this area is growing, year on year so fast, and anyone who follows the NBA be aware of the massive developments they've made in data analysis and everything else. Like, where do you see this going? Over the next sort of medium to long term. Even do you see any sort of big developments coming down the line, or where is performance analysis going?
Yeah, how long is a piece of string? It's there's incredible things happening in that realm. Working with companies, we have Stats Perform with us. A lot of AI stuff, a lot of virtual reality workshop stuff that we're doing with injured players. We haven't implemented it yet, but we're trying to implement it. But it's certainly been implemented in some of the bigger budget sports in the US, and I suppose very relevant in our sport is head injuries, and obviously concussion. So a lot of what we're gearing towards is medical departments being able to, I suppose, bring back players back to speed and back to the availability to play point without exposing them to more damage, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's where technology can come in and help that area, where putting players in different scenarios so their body agility wise and movement wise improves while they're injured. So when they do go into that physical confrontation point position, that they're much more prepared. Largely, a lot of that can only be done in a certain way. So virtual reality kind of gives you the visual conditioning around movement, because a lot of those injuries happen early parts of the season when bodies aren't used to movement and reaction and speed and things happening very fast. When you get more conditioned and your body and your visuals are more improved, well, then you can react quicker to certain movements around you and you get less chances of collisions.
Very good. And what about basketball, Paul?
I think, we've heard so much about analytics in the NBA and stuff like that, and I think we're going to see full circle eventually, because it creates styles of play, and we're seeing right now the importance of the 3-point line in basketball. But I think what we're not seeing is the importance of the interior game, and I think right now analysis is leaning us towards one way and forgetting that there is other elements of the game as well. So I think that's a slight negative maybe towards it. But I think from a positive perspective, I remember we used to do certain things, before statistical analysis came in. We used to post deflection winners every week, and we'd identify like who was probably the best finisher at the rim, and we'd post every Monday night, and you'd see the players running over. So I think right now anything that's going to be improved, I think, has to be a confidence builder, and as well, because I think the one thing that I've always tried to do, especially, is find a trend of a player that can give them confidence, which means that they're within the group, they're being valued. So I think that's the biggest thing with statistical or video analysis or any sort of performance analysis, is to find a trend of what a player can bring, so that other players understand their value. And regardless of what improvements are in the future, I think that's the most important thing, that we, regardless of what it is, it finds the value of a player within an environment to help the group be successful.
And that's a common question. If you've got a full squad and you might have players in the squad who, have a very limited role in the team, but if you can highlight how important that role is, if they're coming in there just like your best rebounder or your best one-on-one defender, or they have a specific role, if you can really use that, if they mightn't score the most points in any game, but you can use video analysis to sort of really prove how valuable they are and give them that confidence boost.
There's so many examples, Niall, where I think what Paul is talking about, it can almost become boring, when statistics lead a way of play and designing a style of play within any sport. And what was popular in soccer many years ago around the Moneyball thing, from when they brought it from baseball into soccer. It's such a dynamic sport, tying the statistical analysis of a player to suit another player to make your style of play work didn't work. And in our sport, I see a lot of the time, a lot of teams will pick up on something that was very popular a year ago with a leading team,
Yeah.
But that leading team a year down the track have changed their style of play because they're ahead of the curve. Where at this point now, a year later, a lot of teams are saying, okay, it worked a year ago, let's get good at that.
Yeah.
But they're almost behind the curve because they're trying to copy too much.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can actually work for a period of time and create your own identity, and create your own identity and how you record and value things, well, then you're actually changing the curve.
Yeah, and I think that's coming back to your same point about putting a value on it, through the whole organization. So even if you're a small club or an elite club, if you, from the top down of your organization, if you put a real value on performance analysis, that'll feed down and through the coaches and the players, and then you'll get the title of this presentation. You'll increase your win percentage, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that, Niall, that just to jump in on that increase your win percentage, that's a philosophy we have in our department, is that through effective performance analysis, you're going to increase the win potential of your team. And that's why I was saying about not pigeonholing performance analysis. That could be just getting an accurate weather call, like ringing a local weather station, getting a really accurate weather call, whatever it may be. It may be just something visually picking up on a player, his feelings or something during the week, or what, saying he looks pretty down, informing that to the coach, because it doesn't have to be statistical analysis. It doesn't have to be video. It's just having your finger on the pulse.
Paul, do you see your role? Because when you're coaching, and the difference is too, like you're like the head coach and the video performance analysis for your team. Like, do you see, like, would you like to have like a specialized performance analysis? Like, I suppose you do. Do you have one? Your new team is Andy McGeever?
Yeah, and Andy McGeever is going to do it this year. And I mean, I think the biggest benefit of that is that he's from a basketball background. But again, like, it's when you're doing that, and I think George mentioned it early on. It's like it's understanding the verbiage, the terminology, so that would then you, as a video analysis, the coach can just say, all right, I need all the Spurs cuts from the last game or whatever it is, or I need all our flattening defense, so they understand what we're doing, so that they can actually highlight those areas rather than, just a video analysis come in, I think this is important, or I think this is important, or whatever it is, but has no relevancy or value to what we're trying to achieve and has no real trend. We might have messed something up once that was of no real trend in the game, really. So like to put that in it would be, I think would be irrelevant. So it has to be a trend, and then obviously getting the video analysis person to understand that and train them in that is the next step. And that's going to be new for me, because I've never done that. So that's going to be a learning curve for me on how to deal with that relationship.
Sometimes I suppose it can be hard to sort of pinpoint or sort of quantify the value of performance analysis, in terms of, a lot of it could be just sort of increasing you around the edges and getting your margins and just sort of making yourself that bit better. But do you have any sort of specific examples where you've like scouted a team or whatever and you've spotted something, and then when the game came around in a big moment, it paid off, and you could see it really sort of come to life, where you spotted one moment, you're like, yes, I knew that was going to happen. You spotted it, and something that a flaw you're going to exploit, or else something that you worked on in training, and it came to fruition. Any examples? Either I'll just open the floor there.
Yeah, sure. Niall, there's weekly examples of that, thankfully. But I suppose some of the big moments would be, I'd take the 2006 European Cup final with Peter Stringer's try in the corner on the right hand side scrum. I mean, we spent an afternoon looking at all the right hand side scrums with all the teams that Biarritz played against, and I think he had something like an old Nokia 3110 or something like that. One of the first phones that had an MP4 the ability to play an MP4 file. And I think we just sat down, we compressed all the scrums into a small file and put it on his phone. He went away and studied it. We came back, we had a chat and a conversation around what the possibilities he could do there, without speaking, like he was talking purposely about himself, what he could do there. And obviously, having looked at the picture and seen the picture, instinctively within the game, he was able to read that situation and make a play that effectively won a European Cup. So, I mean, that's obviously a standout one. I mean, but weekly there's so many of them, because obviously the detail we go into. But I think the biggest skill set is being solution based in the stand for us. It's very different. Every sport is very different. So, but it comes back to what Paul is saying, working with Andy, I believe you said there, it's working with him and him gaining the trust and you gaining the trust in him, that he'll be able to read your philosophy. And once he's up to speed with your philosophy and how you see the game, well, then he'll start to see that for you, and you'll start to trust him, being able to give you the accurate information and stuff that you'll say, yeah, that will work for me, because when we're in the stand, it's so busy, there's so much going on. If I don't understand how the coaches see the game, I can't turn to them in the stand and say, do you know what, they're doing this differently, and I think you should do that. Because giving them a piece of paper with a statistic is no good in the live situation. It's not going to change the course of the game. But taking in all the information during the week and how you plan to attack the game, how you plan to defend the game, and being able to spot that moment of change in the game and give that to the coaches on the screen, that's the vital part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing that George says. So, like, even on our scout reports, we'll always say these are the areas that we're targeting, but we'll also have a be aware of section. So, like, it won't be a trend, but it's just something that we've noticed over a couple of games that this is something that may or may not happen. So I think there's the element of breakdown. It's what's definitely going to happen. We're aware this is definitely going to happen, and then we need to be aware of the be aware section. And it's the very same with players individually. This is what their trends are. This is what they're good at. But we just need to be aware of this may happen, because it happens every 4 or 5 games that he'll pull this move out, or he'll be able to, he's attacked this guy this way. And I think that's important, is the non-negotiables then to be aware of, I think is hugely important, yeah. Very
good. Yeah, from speaking to both of you, it's obvious, how big a role performance analysis plays in sport now at all levels, and I think that role is only going to get bigger. As technologies improve, as things move on, it's only going to get better. Boys, thank you very much for tuning in. It was very informative. So thank you very much for that. For everyone else out there, please remember this is part of a range of discussions that are part of the Basketball Ireland Performance Conference. So please make sure and check out the rest of the videos on our social media. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks again, lads. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, Paul.